Anthill Kids, one of the most sinister child cults of the 20th century. The Anthill Kids were a secretive, isolationist cult led by Anne Hamilton Byrne, active primarily in Australia during the 1970s and 1980s, with some activities extending into Canada. The cult is notorious for its extreme mind control, psychological and physical abuse of children, religious indoctrination, and social isolation, making it one of the most disturbing cases of child manipulation and abuse of the 20th century. Hamilton Byrne's leadership combined charisma, religious authority, and strict disciplinary practices, creating an environment in which followers, especially children, were completely subordinated to her will. Anne Hamilton Byrne, the founder and leader, claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ and a divine messenger, using a mixture of distorted Christianity, Eastern mysticism, and apocalyptic teachings to justify her absolute authority. She founded the Anthill Kids as a closed community, claiming that the group was preparing children to become spiritual leaders and guardians of a new era. From an early age, children were conditioned to obey her instructions blindly and accept doctrines of total submission. The cult's ideology emphasized spiritual purity, chastity, loyalty to the group, and rejection of the outside world, promoting both social and cultural isolation. Daily life within the Anthill Kids was strictly controlled. Children and adults lived in isolated communities, following routines of domestic work, religious studies, and spiritual activities, including rituals, singing, and meditation imposed by Hamilton Byrne. Children were often adopted or purchased from external families, receiving new names and identities to reinforce psychological dependency and erase previous family ties. They were also subjected to intensive indoctrination, including restricted outside contact, strict schedules, controlled diets, and severe punishment for any disobedience. One of the cult's most insidious methods was the use of drugs and psychological manipulation for mind control. Hamilton Byrne administered sedatives to children to maintain obedience and reduce resistance, creating dependency and making the young followers vulnerable to ongoing indoctrination. She also used fear and threats, claiming that any attempt to escape or disobey would result in divine punishment or terrible suffering, reinforcing the idea that the outside world was hostile and dangerous. This combination of isolation, extreme discipline, and ideological indoctrination molded a highly vulnerable and dependent mindset, ensuring total submission to the leader. Physical and sexual abuse was also present in some areas, although much of the control focused on psychological and emotional abuse. Children were forced to participate in rituals, study religious doctrines, perform heavy tasks, and follow irrational orders unquestioningly. Any resistance was severely punished, including public reprimand, food deprivation, isolation, and humiliation. Hamilton Byrne constantly reinforced the narrative that the group was special, chosen by God, while the outside world represented danger and moral corruption. Education in the Anthill Kids was tightly controlled, combining religious doctrine, cultural isolation, and ideological training, while limiting practical skills that could allow the young to gain autonomy outside the cult. The intention was to create highly dependent and loyal followers, prepared to perpetuate the group's ideology and maintain absolute secrecy about its practices. Children were socially conditioned to believe that obeying the leader was the only path to spiritual salvation, while any contact with outside sources was seen as a threat to the group's order. The collapse of the Anthill Kids occurred gradually during the 1980s, as survivors managed to escape and expose the cult's activities, attracting attention from the media, police authorities, and child protection organizations. Investigations revealed illegal adoptions, psychological abuse, and extreme control, leading to legal actions against Anne Hamilton Byrne and several close members. Media coverage shocked the public, revealing the extent of isolation, manipulation, and cruelty practiced within the cult, and highlighting the lasting impact on the victims, many of whom suffered profound psychological trauma and reintegration difficulties. The legacy of the Anthill Kids is both tragic and instructive. It demonstrates how charismatic leadership, isolation, ideological indoctrination, and abuse of power can combine to create closed, controlled micro-societies, particularly when involving vulnerable children. Studies of the cult have provided insights into cult psychology, systematic child abuse, identity manipulation, and prolonged trauma, serving as a reference for prevention measures, child protection policies, and education about the dangers of closed cults. The case also illustrates the ability of pseudo-religion and charismatic authority to exploit psychological vulnerability for total control of individuals, especially minors. In summary, the Anthill Kids represent one of the most extreme examples of child cults and psychological abuse in a closed society. Anne Hamilton Burns' leadership exemplifies how charismatic authority and ideological manipulation can create environments of absolute submission, suffering, and long-lasting trauma. Studying this group remains essential for understanding destructive cult dynamics, child abuse, and mechanisms of psychological control, offering historical and social lessons about the risks of authoritarian leaders and extreme ideological isolation.